Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Scott Sinclair. I'm the Senior Manager of Programs here at Cancer and Careers, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. For those of you who are listening in on your phone, please let us know by sending an email to cancerandcareers@cew.org with your name and your phone number so we know who's dialing in. That way we can confirm your attendance and make sure you receive any relevant follow-up after the webinar. If you're new to Cancer and Careers, first of all, welcome. We're glad to have you. We are a national nonprofit and the only program of its kind solely dedicated to empowering and educating people with cancer to thrive in their work environment. This is a list of all of our free programs and services that we offer. Our comprehensive website is available in both English and Spanish, and it's the heart of everything that we do. There you can find various support services, including our resume review service, and access to career coaches. Our educational blog and newsfeed are both rich resources where those who've been diagnosed, their caregivers, their employers, healthcare professionals, they can all stay current on topics related to work and cancer. Our free publication library is also available in both English and Spanish, and it provides tangible, easy to digest information on working and looking for work after a cancer diagnosis. These are available in both hard copy and PDF formats. We also offer numerous events every year, from hour-long webinars like the one you're about to see today to full-day events. And I'll be back at the end of the presentation to give you a little peek at what's coming up for us. For those of you who are seeking continuing education credits, this slide lists all the organizations that have been accredited for today's webinar, as well as the required steps for getting a certificate. This information is also available on our website. A link to the evaluation and the post-test will be shared at the conclusion of today's webinar. So please take the time to complete that at that point. However, if you're not able to complete it today, that's totally fine. You'll receive an email tomorrow, Thursday, January 25th, no later than 5 p.m. Eastern. And for those of you who are planning to request continuing education credits, our accrediting bodies require us to share this slide and let you know that there are no conflicts of interest to report. And as you might know, Zoom has a lot of great features which you can use to interact with us today. You'll see a chat box in your features panel. Feel free to use that to communicate with us, our staff, other attendees. Just one thing to note is that the chat is not private and it will show your first and last name. So that's something to be mindful of when or if you decide to engage in the chats. You'll also see a Q&A box on that same features panel. If you have a question for Julie, please drop that question in the Q&A box. I'll come on at the end and Julie and I will go through those questions. Again, we know the importance of privacy, so there is an option to submit your questions anonymously in the Q&A box. And again, we ask that you put the questions in the Q&A box so we don't miss anything accidentally put in the chat box. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our Cancer and Careers year-round sponsors who support all of our core programs, including this one, and allow us to continue providing resources and services free of charge. So thank you to everybody here on this slide. Now, for most people, workplace stress is a given. When you add cancer in the mix, it can be debilitating. But we're here to help you think about your priorities and how you can balance your job, family, and your own well-being to avoid letting stress get the best of you. Leading today's webinar is Julie Larson, a longtime collaborator with Cancer and Careers. Julie is a licensed social worker and has her own practice. Prior to the practice, she was the Young Adult Program Director at Cancer Care and continues to work closely with the AYA cancer community. It is my pleasure to welcome back Julie Larson.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Scott. It's always a pleasure to work with Cancer and Careers. So I will always answer that call, and I'm happy to be here with all of you today. We are going to dive into the topic of managing stress in the workplace and what that is like for you. I want to just preface that this, for me, always begins by understanding yourself. So when we think about stress in general, Yes, I am going to try and be as targeted as I can to what that might be like and the differences related to being in a professional setting, whatever that is for you, or workplace setting. But honestly, managing your stress at home, managing your stress in the middle of the night when you're alone, managing your stress with your family members or within social settings, in many ways begins and acts in the same way. So if you're thinking about this, I want you to maybe find a piece of paper and a pen and begin to take some notes. Sometimes I like to think of these talks as doing individual therapy in mass. So I would really love for you to sit back and let my words guide you into thinking about yourself and how stress shows up for you. So this slide right here is just a little bit of a roadmap. Where are we going today for the next, 45 minutes to an hour? We're going to be talking about learning and beginning to think about what triggers your stress. How do you recognize it? So being triggered and recognizing it, that self-awareness piece is key. What do you do with it? Maybe what do you do with it right now, in a reactive way, or just in an intuitive kind of historical way? This is what you've always done with your stress. Or what might be new ways of thinking about how to manage and care for yourself? We're going to talk about that. And then how is this self-care different when I think about being in a workplace setting? Okay, so that's kind of a roadmap of where we're going to go. And in that last kind of bullet, maybe that begins with thinking about boundaries and your own identity professionally. Scott already mentioned the Q&A. Please feel free to use that if there's a specific question that comes up. Also, if you feel comfortable putting your name, having your name up there in that chat and being part of the discussion, I always feel that these opportunities, even though this is a webinar and not entirely interactive, are very profound ways of connecting to other people who are navigating a cancer diagnosis and working, are living their lives. So I am a professional. I will certainly give a certain lens to this, but you all are walking the walk. So if you feel comfortable and you want to go ahead and put some comments or what's resonating for you or what's challenging for you in the chat so that others in this space can also reflect on and look at those words too, and myself included, I empower you to do that, because sometimes that can be a profound moment in these spaces too. So let's keep moving. You have cancer. The words "you have cancer," when you think back on that moment of being diagnosed or even continuing on, it is emotional overload, right? Emotional overload, not only medically about figuring out, what is this diagnosis? What are my treatment options? Navigating the medical system, the hospital location in and of itself, but also how am I going to talk to people in my life about this? What am I immediately feeling and thinking about as far as my fears and my uncertainty? And that might include your uncertainty about your commitments. So your commitments as a parent, your commitments at work, your commitments within your home and your roles and responsibility. The other thing that can kind of first immediately fly up and be on the table is disclosure decisions. Who do I talk to about this? Who do I tell? When do I tell them? Why do I tell them? And that is a key factor often in a workplace setting. So who do I talk to about this? And then I'm seeing some comments right there in chat. It just caught my eye there too about I've tried at work through cancer. I don't talk to anyone. And so figuring out, is that safe for me to talk? Is there a reason why I'm private? Or is that a decision that I've made? What am I wanting and hoping for when I disclose my cancer diagnosis? And then the questions that the fear about the future, what's coming for me, fear of recurrence, fear of progression, what can I plan on or not plan on? Those horizon lines feel very uncertain and blurry. And then questions about the impact of your treatment, right? So I know I'm going to do this treatment. That's the standard of care. I don't know quite how it's going to affect me. And so I don't know what I need to talk to or what I don't, and maybe until I get moving and get going. So, and over the long haul. So all of these things kind of begin to flood and be part of the cancer trajectory. So let's just pause for a minute and say that's a lot. And in general, have a 101 slide here, just foundationally in general, stress. We use that word a lot in our lives. I'm stressed, or this is stressing me out. Stress is your body's way of responding to a demand. Okay. And that demand may feel or be interpreted as a threat, like a cancer diagnosis, or a challenge, like an interview for a job, right? So and our bodies respond to stress in three ways. We have a physical, like our actual physical body responds to stress, emotional and mental. And whether you're tuned in and aware of all of those or not, they're all happening. So we may be less aware of how stress shows up physically, very aware of how it shows up mentally, but they truly knowing that, just knowing that stress is showing up mentally, emotionally, and physically also gives us three entrance ramps into how we can cope. All right. So that's another way of kind of organizing this a little bit. There are different types of stress. So when you think about it, we tend to lump stress as a negative, as a bad thing, but really stress also kind of serves us too. And sometimes we have what we kind of call healthy stress, when we have to kind of really sit on the edge of our seat, pay close attention. So I want to just be very careful in thinking about stress, as it's not all bad. And in fact, in my office, it is very common for me to reframe certain feelings as not necessarily all bad either. We tend to vilify things like worry and fear, where worry and fear show up when we're stressed and serve us in certain ways. They can also get overactive, of course, but we have to remember that not all stress is bad. Stress can be working for you too. And I think this last piece of this 101 on stress is that it's subjective. And a lot of times when I'm working in relationships where things feel tricky, are complex, it's around that difference of perception and maybe tolerance. What feels incredibly stressful to me may not faze you at all, right? And sometimes in our relationships, that's kind of where it's tricky. I don't know why you're not getting this. This is very difficult. And somebody else might be like, it's very simple. We're just going to do this. And that misbalance of stress is subjective and it's personal, can sometimes show up in our relationships. So when we take into account the last two slides, kind of just the experience of cancer, all that you're having to focus on and deal with, and then the way stress is showing up in our body. I like to begin a lot of my talks with people, but also certainly many of my sessions individually with my clients in my office with a reality check. Like, hold on, time out. Let's just put all of this on the table for a minute. Diagnosis of cancer, working. Maybe you have a family life that's busy and complicated. Maybe you've got different roles and responsibilities that are very dependent on you. Maybe you just naturally are somebody that tends to worry and feel stressed. So just hold on and look at that. When we look at it all, we put it all on the table, it kind of allows us a minute to be like, well, no wonder I'm feeling impatient. No wonder I'm feeling worry and fear. No wonder I'm feeling overwhelmed, right? It allows us some space to give ourselves some self-compassion and cut ourselves a break and say, I'd be surprised if these things weren't leaving me feeling unsettled. Okay. So sometimes one of the first things that you can do to take care of yourself is have a reality check moment. Let's put it all on the table and take a look at it in order to give yourself permission to not be feeling quite as comfortable as you'd want. Be honest with yourself and kind, because I am feeling this way. I mean, it makes sense. I feel a sense of tenderness or compassion for myself, given everything that I'm having to juggle. I would say sometimes we kind of want to, and in fact, in my office, just before this session, I was talking to a man and who was feeling a lot of stress. And I said, let's bookmark this day. Let's circle it. Let's kind of rate how intense these feelings of discomfort are today. And then let's watch this over time, right? Let's really get an inventory of how significant this level of distress is for you, and check in, tomorrow morning, check in over the weekend, check in a week from now, check in a month and see, are you at the same level? If you are, then we need to pay close attention to that and take care of you in a specific way. Or is it just really important for you to know that these feelings ebb and flow and they change? And sometimes that feeling of impermanence, or the truth of impertinence, is one of the most powerful ways of caring for ourselves and remembering and holding on to. And then finally, and I love these words together, compassionate authority. So when we look at all of this that you're dealing with, and we look at how it's emotionally and physically and mentally feeling, right? Then you've got a choice. You can either continue to white knuckle it through or avoid it or not really look at it or not be honest about it, Or you can take compassionate authority and say, you know what? I have to be kind. I have to do something. I have personal responsibility to care for myself in this. I've just looked at it honestly. And if I don't do something then to take care of myself, that's not being compassionate to myself. So if you wake up in the morning and you've got 103 temperature, you're going to take responsibility for taking care of yourself. You're not just going to white knuckle it through that day. Same if you're feeling mentally and emotionally overwhelmed or distressed, then you have to take compassionate authority and say, well, then I've got to walk slower through this day. I've got to lower my expectations. I've got to call in some other people to be with me. And that is the act of being compassionate and taking an authority for yourself. So again, when I think about kind of my work as an individual clinician and in talking with people and thinking about caring for ourselves, it all begins with self-awareness. If we don't know what we're feeling or we don't know what's happening for us, then we don't quite know how to take care of ourselves, right? So I always challenge and tell my clients, and I'm going to tell you right now, to develop a habit, cultivate a habit of checking in with yourself. What does that mean? It means just throughout the day or in moments when you anticipate it feeling more intense or complex, whether you're walking into the office for a first time, whether this is going to be a big board meeting, whether this is going to be someplace where you have to do a presentation, whether it's a big hard conversation with HR, whether it is a moment that you're coming in after an appointment, whether it's sitting in the waiting room, just check in with how am I doing? How am I doing? And then beginning to see if you can begin to name and increase your feeling word vocabulary of how you're feeling. So I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling impatient. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling irritable. I'm feeling confused, right? There's a lot of feeling words. I find it interesting. There's a study that I once read. I don't not remember where it is, so sadly I can't completely quote it, but I will tell you that there was a study that I read that kind of said that most people use between 15 to 20 feeling words on repeat. So we've got like our 15 to 20 feeling words that are our favorite words that we go to again and again and again. Those are the words we use all the time. I'm so frustrated, or I'm just like, I'm just annoyed, or I'm sad, or I'm confused. We use the same words again and again. But really, there are dozens upon dozens of words that describe how we feel. And the better you can get at being very specific about how you feel, then the better you are at caring for and attending to that feeling. Because there is a distinct difference between feeling dread and feeling tired, right? There's a little bit of a shade of a difference between feeling irritated and feeling impatient, right? And when we can be very specific about how we're feeling, then we have a better clue, or we might have more ideas about how to take care of those feelings. Okay, so I've given you some homework. I've said, do the reality check and kind of give yourself permission to be compassionate and to take care of yourself. But then let that begin by developing a habit of checking in with yourself and naming the feeling that you're having. Where are you feeling it in your body? Later in a slide coming up, I'm going to talk about, those 3 entrance ramps that I talked about: mental, emotional. I'm going to just hold my heart, and then just physically your body. But sometimes people are more tuned in to one of those 3. And if you're not as connected to your body, and many survivors tend to kind of dissociate being connected with their body because their bodies have had to go through a lot of invasive procedures, whether that is, getting even just a needle prick or a surgery, that when we can reconnect with our bodies, we can also begin to find ways of calming and centering that. Brenda, I see your note there. This sounds like being mindful. Yes, 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 it is. I do think that mindfulness and being aware, self-awareness, is the beginning of a lot of self-care. So yeah, you hit that nail right on the head. Finding where that stress is in your body is another way of being able to begin to attend to that. And then I love these 2 questions in juxtaposition with themselves, and it's a way that you might begin to talk to yourself. When you notice, step 1, notice that you're in a moment of struggle, right? And you're feeling X, Y, or Z. Then can you ask yourself the question, what am I doing maybe in this exact right now, that's helpful? And what am I doing that's not working so well for me? Or how may I be helpful to myself in this exact right now? So, you're sitting, I'm just going to give a kind of very basic, trivial kind of experience, but you're sitting at a red light when you're late, right? So you immediately notice that you're feeling impatient and that you're feeling anxious about getting to wherever you're going on time. You can't reality check. You can't change the light color, and you're going to have to follow traffic rules in order to get there. And we can't really control how the other person's going to react on the other side. So how can I be helpful? I can sit here and I can scream at the red light. I can tap the steering wheel over and over again, and I can just like bop in my chair. And that's kind of amping my body up and making me continue to feel that buzz of like anxiety and pressure and impatience. Or I can maybe take a breath, say out loud, I'm feeling impatient. Say out loud, I regret that I didn't leave 5 minutes earlier. Say out loud, I can be kind and gracious when I walk in the door. These are things that I have control over, right? It's that quick question of, in this moment of struggle, what can I do that can be helpful? And what can I do that's not working so well for me? And that's something that you can think about in many different instances. When you're laying in bed at night and you're having a hard time of falling asleep, when you are at the office and the work is just flying at you and nobody's really responding to you in meaningful ways, when you are going to get ready to walk into an appointment, how can I be helpful? How can to yourself, to myself? How can I be helpful to myself? I can slow down. I can listen with intention. What are those things? Okay, so this is the slide I was talking about, and I want everybody to just kind of think about themselves, because in my practice, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've been in my private practice for a good bulk of that time. I would say, if I'm being honest, that while all people think, feel, and be, that many people are more accustomed to noticing their stress in one of these three lanes. So who are you? And knowing who you are is going to help you notice your stress, right? Think about yourself, are you a thinker? Meaning that your stress shows up in that thought wheel spin, like, okay, but what if this happens? And what if this happens? And if this happens, I'm going to do this happen. And then and that is your kind of busy brain, right? Is that where your stress is? And that can be anxious, like fast, or it can be heavy. Like, I'm never going to get through this, or this is really, really hard. I'm overwhelmed. I'm never going to make sense of this. I feel hopeless. I feel concerned. I feel worried. So that's all thinking. That's all a narrative in your mind. Okay. When I'm sitting with people who seem to be busy or head heavy, busy brains, often my question to them is, how are you feeling? Right? What is this making you feel? And beginning to help them find that connection between what they're thinking and how they're feeling, because that's going to open our window into what we can do to take care of yourself. Right? So how are you feeling? So if you find that you're a thinker, can you begin to connect to how you're feeling? And then, how may I be helpful? What can you do to calm and to soothe and to care for yourself? Okay. Put that aside. Now, there might be some of you that I'm talking to today that are real feelers, right? Not that you don't think, you are thinking, but you do notice you're feeling first. And when I sit with these people in my office, they're teary and they're agitated, and they say things a bit different. They say things like, I'm just overwhelmed. I'm confused. I'm lost. I am just kind of just not knowing where I'm going to go with this. I feel dread because I'm just so confused and so lost. So all of their words that they're telling me are related to a feeling, and they're kind of just heavy in that, right? And so to those clients, I say the words, I can see that you're feeling that way, right? So I'm acknowledging that. And then, can you tell me, are you aware, can you listen closely? What are the words that are behind that? What's your narrative? What's happening in your mind? What are you thinking about? And the work there is to kind of reverse that connection between when I am feeling dread or when I am feeling nervous and worry, I am thinking X, Y, and Z. Okay. And so in that, then we're going to begin to touch base with, what are those thoughts? And are those thoughts in any way maybe not accurate or a little distorted, in which way we can kind of challenge them or think of them in more ways, find more truths, and that might result in feeling a little different. Just so you know, that's the basis or the foundation of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is as effective often as antidepressants. And so what you're talking about there is just tuning in, noticing, how is my thinking and my feeling going together? Okay. So it's one of the pieces of homework that I'm going to give you in that effort to notice, right? So when I say cultivate a habit of noticing, notice your feeling, notice how that combination between feeling and thinking is working. And then finally, what the heck's happening in your body, right? For me, Julie, when I feel stress, I most often feel it in like a gnawing, like emptiness in my gut. I don't know, that's just where it comes up. I just like, it's like a gut punch right there. Some people feel it in their tension in their shoulders. Some people feel like a mild, a kind of grinding headache. Some people notice tension in their jaw or just an overwhelming sense of fatigue. Do you know where it is in your body? And if I'm honest, there are others in work in my office who are less articulate with what they're thinking about and unable to really name the feeling that they're having, just don't have a lot of that vocabulary to kind of say what they're feeling. But boy, oh boy, do they notice it in their body. Also, remember I had said there's a lot of entrance ramps. So however you're noticing it, just recognize that for yourself, okay? And we're going to take compassionate authority. So when you notice it, now we got to do something with it, right? When I think about self-care, and again, you're like, gosh, Julie, we haven't even talked about work at all. But again, remember, this is foundational, right? So noticing and self-awareness and thinking about how all of these things work together is going to work for you in the middle of the night. It's also going to work for you as you walk into work, right? So we've got to kind of create this foundation, okay? So self-care is, in my opinion, what I've watched in my life, so often an act of balancing between many different ways of taking care of ourselves. Sometimes we need to tune in and analyze and figure out like, or rather, I'm going to go to the bottom blocks, insight and calm. Sometimes we want to like kind of dig in to when we got triggered and why did that happen? What leads to that? What pattern? What do I always get to? We kind of begin to assess and analyze and kind of try and problem figure it out for ourselves. And sometimes we need to just simply let the problem solving and the analyzing it go and find calm first. I think our culture in general, Western culture likes to answer things and find a reason and a step-by-step process to kind of navigate, right? And our minds immediately kind of click into gear when it might be helpful or important to remember that sometimes the first thing you might want to do is to just get calm, right? Just get some degree of ease. And then when we're in that space and we're not activated and we're not reactive, then we can not only feel better, but we can act a bit smarter. Our brain kind of turns on in a different way. I think self-care is a balance between discipline and compassion. As much as I said, that's why I like the words compassionate authority, because I feel like that's the blend of that. Some days we do need to cut ourselves a break, truly, and just lay low and give yourself permission to relax and to lower your standards and retreat, honestly, or withdraw. That's okay. We can't just go and white knuckle it through all the time. But then on the other hand, we have to remember that self-care also means sometimes getting up and getting in the shower and picking up the phone and reaching out and calling somebody, or getting outside to see the bright blue sky and to find the discipline to care for ourselves. So sometimes you've got to do a little bit of both, right? You've got to watch that for yourself. And only you know where you are on this teeter-totter, right? And then sometimes we've got to tune in and we've got to like figure out how to care for ourselves and how to do this all on our own. There are some that, need help figuring out, how do I take care of myself in the absence of others? How do I just do this and tend to my own distress? And then sometimes we have to have that capacity to reach out and to ask for others to help us, right? And so who are you? Are you somebody that very easily reaches out and maybe need to build those muscles of how do I do it all by myself in the middle of the night? Or are you somebody that tends to kind of batten it down and do it all on your own? And maybe you need support, or maybe need to think about, how do I begin to reach and bring people in to help comfort and soothe me? And And so, that's on that. I'm seeing that big post on that in the chat, and I'm going to try and get to it here in a second, but thank you for adding it. And I hope other people are reading it too. Again, you guys are often so supportive and caring to one another. Where are we on strategies? Okay, so let's think about how we think about all of this. Strategy number 1, we've noticed our distress. We are aware of kind of maybe our thinking, our feeling, our body, and that, right? And what are we going to do? Well, because you're living it, that fear and worry may not completely go away. In fact, sometimes people come into my office and they're feeling distressed, they're not feeling their best. And I think they somehow think that by starting therapy, that's all going to change and they're going to be able to just feel a lot calmer and better. And I hope that you do, but not because it goes away, but because you know how to surf that feeling a bit in a different way. And one of the ways you can do that is naming the feeling. Okay, so I mentioned before in the noticing, can you name the feeling? There's some cool science around that. At least my nerdy self kind of loves this, that when we feel stress, a particular part of our brain lights up. And you might know what that is, but it's the oldest part of our brain. It's the limbic system. It's back here, the brainstem area. And that is where we feel fight, flight, or freeze. And we just respond to the stress as a threat or a challenge, right? And we need that. It's protective, it's survival. And so when you feel that, that's why you immediately go into that reactive space. When you name the feeling, if you get that groove and build that muscle of noticing your stress and you name it with a feeling, then we've just drawn a line between the limbic system all the way up here to what is our prefrontal cortex, which is where the language center of your brain is located. And it's also where judgment and reasoning and impulse control and emotional regulation occur, right? So just in naming your feeling, like I am feeling so impatient. I am feeling so overwhelmed. I am feeling so lonely. Then we've just created a little bit of space between being and having the feeling and being able to make a choice in how we respond to the feeling, right? There's a difference between reacting and responding. And responding means there it is, and I'm going to make a choice in what I do with that feeling. How may I be helpful? It puts you back in the driver's seat as opposed to the feeling in the driver's seat, which then leads to kind of sometimes impulsivity and reactiveness. Also, when you begin to notice and name it, then we begin to build a tolerance for that uncomfortable feeling, which gives us flexibility of our attention. There it is. I'm waking up my day today and I have a scan in a week, and yet I have to go to work and I have to do this and I'm not at my best. So compassionate authority, I've got to move through this day in a different way. I know that scan is coming up. This feeling is normal, reality check. And it's leading me to have all of these what ifs. Okay, got it. I'm going to challenge those thinking things in a different way. My emotions, it's leaving me feeling a very low frustration tolerance because that feeling is there. Because I know this, I'm going to have to be very intentional about my day. Today, I'm going to have to move slower. I'm going to have to look people in the eye in order to keep myself grounded. I'm going to take some breaks through my day to day, right? And that's all because I'm going to live in the presence of this uncomfortable feeling. And the more you do that, the stronger you get. So if I have anybody on this call right now who's diagnosed, you've got some years under your belt, then you may, I don't know, but you may notice a difference between how you first felt when you had that feeling of agina and irritation and anxiety about cancer and today. It's not gone. It's still there, but sometimes our ability to tolerate living in the presence of it changes. Take the hit of that feeling, greet it, name it. That's what I mean by name it. Oh, hello, worry. You are walking with me today. I see you. I'm aware of you. Fear. Thank you for showing up in the room. Okay, I know that you're there. I know what you're trying to yell and to say to me. You're protecting me in some ways. You're with me today. Just name it and see that that's there. Okay. And then I said this already, but when we notice those feelings, calming yourself not only feels better, but it helps you to act smarter. So it helps you to kind of make those choices, right? It re-engages your thinking part of your brain so that you're not being reactive. I see that note right there. You're supposed to kind of sort of ride the wave and get past it. I don't know that you're getting past it. I think you're allowing it to pass you. It's a little bit of a difference in that. A metaphor that I sometimes use is just paint the picture with me of you have worked really hard to create this beautiful dinner for your entire family, maybe, and you've set a gorgeous table and everybody's coming over. People have taken their time. They're all coming over. Everybody's finally seated. Drinks have been poured. Everybody's finally sitting down, and a crazy loud locomotive train starts plowing through your front yard. It's so loud. The windows are rattling. So everybody's like, nobody can hear each other. Nobody can talk. You've planned this amazing moment, and now it is completely interrupted by this locomotive going through the front yard. And so the instinct or the reaction might be to go out in the front yard and redirect the train and tell them to go a different way and stop it, whatever. But actually what you're doing when you're trying to do that is you're just keeping the train in your front yard. Whereas another way of thinking about it is just let's sit still. There's a train going through. Nobody can talk. If anybody lives in New York City, then you know what that's like to be on the phone and have an ambulance go by, right? I can't talk there. Just let it be and just wait. And this feeling will pass. And in the presence of this loud, crazy, upsetting space, I'm just going to kind of stay calm, keep myself calm, and then it will change and it will feel different. So I think that's what I mean, is that when we're riding the wave, we are going to stay steady and allow this feeling of discomfort or this moment that's being triggered by lots of thoughts and by lots of feelings, we're going to let it shift past us. It's a thought. It's a feeling, right? It's not actually happening right this minute. So we can say, okay, I'm going to let this thought float by. I'm going to let this feeling float by. And then in the midst of this, then I'm going to continue on. How do we do that? So our minds take a lot of trips. Our minds travel, right? Our minds often, when we feel anxiety and fear, are going into the future. They're taking a train of terribles into the future. What if, what if, what if? How do I make a contingency plan? How do I prepare for that? What is my boss going to say? How do I continue to work with these limitations? What if people begin to say or think this about me? How do I do this? And all our mind is going that way. Sometimes our mind is rehashing. I wish I would have done that. I wish I wouldn't have said that. Oh my gosh, I regret that. And I shouldn't have been as honest. Now what, all of that, that's all living in the past. And we need to come back to right here and right now. So use your body exists only in the present. Your body can't time travel forward or backward. Your body is here right now. Your mind time travels, but come back to your five senses. And so this is a trick, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, that I know a lot of my clients use when they're having a hard time falling asleep, or if they're feeling unique kind of panic, anxiety that's really taking them on a trip. Can you in this moment see it, catch it? I'm struggling. And see 5 things that you see. Okay, so I see my plant, I see my coffee cup, I see my clock, I see my chair, I see my candle. 4 things that you hear. I hear my noise machine in the hall. I hear my clock ticking. I hear the cars on the road. 3 things that you feel. I feel the temperature of the room on my skin. I feel the floor under my feet. I feel the lotion on my hands when I do this, right? 2 things that you smell. I can smell that smell of that hand lotion. I can smell the coffee. And 1 thing that you taste. Okay, go through that list. What you notice happens is the pace begins to change. Also, it begins to redirect your thinking. So I think of attention, your attention, as a flashlight, right? And when our attention, our flashlight, is shining on our worry, our concern, our regret, that's all that's kind of consuming our awareness. And when you do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you watched that, it gets harder and harder. It's easy to do 5 things you see. It gets harder and harder to do feel, taste, smell. You have to really pay attention. And that's turning your flashlight away from that distress and back to you right now. Okay? It's a trick. It's a strategy, not a trick. It's a strategy for maybe kind of bringing your body home. Break your time into manageable chunks, right? Sort your thoughts into past, present, and future. I love that one. When you begin to pay attention to your thoughts and you're like, that is a future thought. I'm going to leave that to my future self to figure out. It does stress me out a little bit, makes me feel worry, but I'm not there right now. But when I get there, my future self will deal with that. You can kind of give it to your future self. Grounding techniques coming back to now. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is grounding. Getting up and moving your location. So stand up from your seat and go to the bathroom and wash your hands and look at yourself in the mirror. Look outside of a window, call a friend to kind of break the bubble of your thoughts. Take a deep breath, put your feet on the ground, breathe. All of those things can kind of break that bubble of you're lost in that spin and bring you home to your body. You might know, I'm going to kind of fly through some of these slides that you may or may already know, just so that we get to some other ones. But a lot of times worry and anxiety, if you look at it face to face, think about this for yourself. If you look at worry and anxiety face to face, it's sometimes an unanswered question, right? There's a question that you have and it's making you feel fear and worry. So can you write those questions down? And maybe that might guide conversations with your medical team, right? So gathering information about how your treatment might impact you might be part of the worry about how you're going to continue to work through this. Gathering information on how personal side effects might meet different expectations of the people around you and how you might ask for accommodations or talk to people about, I've noticed this about myself. Can I ask these things to help me accommodate things? Educate yourself on your rights and your options. So really look at that worry and see if there's questions and how you can get answers to those questions. As a part of educating yourself, not only around treatment options and side effect and symptom management, it might also be mentally and emotionally around where your triggers are. I've put these 3 pictures up there because I notice in my office, these are common triggers. Other people can be common triggers, certain people at work that you just don't really work, or always ask you with puppy dog eyes, like, how are you doing? Or kind of dig in ways that you really don't want to go there at work, or don't say anything at all, just kind of feel oblivious. Knowing that they're a trigger gives you a reality check moment that I've got to take care of myself as I approach this person. Dates on a calendar or seasons in the year can bring up a lot of memory and a lot of things that you recall. And that might be, again, another reality check. I know my trigger there, and I have to take care of myself around this time of year or as I lead into a scan in a different way than typical. Hot topics. Hot topics can be things. So when things like, my aunt did this with her diagnosis, I don't know why you're not doing that. Or what about diet? Do you believe this? Or fitness and exercise, or sometimes platitudes, all of those things. If those are hot topics for you, then you know it. And when it comes up, then you just know in that presence, I've got to take a deep breath. I've got to get my feet on the ground because I'm face to face with a trigger. So boundaries are a common work issue, right? If you're working through cancer, you may be preserving a professional identity, a personal identity, and a cancer survivor identity. You might be kind of creating some boundaries even within yourself. And knowing boundaries basically are just defined. The second bullet that I have there, clear boundaries define what's yours and what's not. So this is my responsibility. This is what I own. And this is the other side of that. So clear boundaries are just kind of understanding that. Clear boundaries are also kind of, when I'm at home, I function in these ways. When I'm at work, I function in these ways, or I kind of present myself in X, Y, or Z different ways. Do you know what those things are? When you do, boundaries lead to more confidence and stability. They reduce anxiety and control. When you don't know if you're doing this, am I doing this? Do people expect this of me? Do they not expect that of me? Are people still thinking I'm doing these things? Then it's kind of anxiety provoking and overwhelming. Am I supposed to talk to people about my cancer diagnosis at work? You have to decide, where are my identity boundaries in this? There's skill. And it's not easy to hold boundaries, right? So sometimes people infringe on those boundaries, and not just practically and logistically, but emotionally. So in my office, I often talk about, are you feeling the emotional kind of like influence of other people's anxiety, other people's overwhelm, other people's distress, and now you're kind of holding it, right? So beginning to notice what's your side of the street. Keep your side of the street clean. Like, you might be feeling really anxious about that, but I'm not. I see that you are, but I'm not. Or this is how I feel about it. Just knowing even those emotional and mental boundaries are important too. In work, and certainly in work when you're navigating it with a cancer diagnosis, is paying close attention to when fear is a big word, but think about it this way. When fear is pushing your effort to maintain boundaries, like this is my boundary. This is what I've said I can and can't do. I'm going to try and turn off my computer at this time. I'm not going to work on treatment days. I'm not going to work on the weekend. I'm going to only talk to these people. Oh my gosh, but if I don't do this, then people won't think that I'm going to be responsible or accountable. If I don't do this, then I'm worried that somebody's going to be upset and irritated and annoyed. That's your feeling of fear that's pushing on your boundary. And it might signpost having a conversation with another person. Listen, I'm concerned that if I don't, how will I maintain this kind of awareness within you that with my employer, my boss, that my job matters a great deal to me. And that I want to continue to be considered for promotions or considered for responsible things. But at the same time, I have to set some boundaries around my physical capacity at this time. So I want to keep doing this, but I've also got to be mindful of where my capacity is. But I want you to know this, and I'm going to get to it, but this is how I have to structure that space. So sometimes it's just about being communicative and open. What if everyone is doing the best they can? So sometimes, we feel that the people pushing on our boundaries and getting frustrated, and that can feel really irritating and annoying, and we get frustrated and dread. And how do we say, what if everybody that's walking into work today is doing their very best? I don't know what their morning was like. I don't know what is pushing on them outside of this space. And maybe I am feeling they're wearing that, and that's coming out here. So what are they needing? What am I needing? And how do I just take account for that and give people grace at the same time that I would want somebody to do that for me? Sometimes in our boundaries, we have to watch that too. Smooth communication, considering, who is your support network, who is the best audience for what you're needing today, who do you turn to for what, right? We don't turn to the same people for all of our needs. So really knowing kind of, these are the people I go to when I have an emotional kind of moment, and they respond to me in the right ways. These are the people I go to when I need help with something. And these are the people that I go to when I just want to talk about, mindless stuff and escape everything for a bit. These are the people that I problem solve questions and things at work with. And these are the people that I do that with my children. So who do you turn to for different needs? When you think about walking into a workspace, how do you create? And then I would also empower you to rehearse simple responses for casual interactions. So if you've not been in the workspace for some time, or you're returning to work and your presence looks different, like you've lost your hair, you're wearing a wig, you just simply look different, and you know that people are going to say something. What can you say? Now your way that you respond to that is completely up to you. You can completely redirect the conversation. You can have a sound bite that you use that feels like it answers it. But what do you do, and what do you say, and how do you practice and rehearse that so that it feels comfortable and honest and authentic to you? This next point kind of goes back to those triggers. Pay attention to what topics feel sensitive to you. You may not know that initially until it's happened. And then upon reflection, you can be like, ugh, talking about how I'm talking to my kids is sensitive to me. I don't really want to do that with just everybody. There's only a few people that I want to. Or talking about kind of this at work is not comfortable for me. So you might discover what's sensitive for you as you go. And then talking about cancer in general is complicated, and it's rarely a one-shot deal. So often people say, I wish I would have said that. I wish I would have said this to my boss or my supervisor or my colleague when they asked. And you can always return to a conversation. You can always begin again. This is kind of an idea of a framework of way to think about an awkward or a tricky conversation, is if you are face to face with somebody kind of reaching out to you in a way that you don't want to talk about your diagnosis, then you can rehearse statements that decisively cut short that personal direction of the exchange. So things like, usually I'm fine talking about my diagnosis, but today I just need to focus on other things. Just that definitively stops it. It's like a big stop sign. Or you can use humor, right? Or use a kind of levity in that response. Oh gosh, I am so sick and tired of talking about cancer. Let's talk about something more interesting. Right now, you have to decide what space you're in with that. You don't want to necessarily minimize yourself or dismiss what you're feeling, but it's again figuring out, is this the space where I want to spend that energy? And how is that? What's the capacity of that other person that I'm across from? Can they get this? What are they going to need to hear that stops this conversation? Because I don't want to go there right now. After you've done that, you have to remember that the spotlight is probably still on you, right? So even when you do that stopping, somebody might be like, oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, no problem. The spotlight's still on you. Then it's kind of still in your ball. The ball's still in your court, unfortunately, to redirect that conversation. So you have to come up with something out of your back pocket, something that you've rehearsed and ready that you can change gears. So I hear you're planning a great summer vacation. Tell me more about it. Or, hey, the last time we were talking, your son was on that little league team. Whatever happened with that? Or I know that Jim was going to give you that new project. Did that ever go through? You've got to immediately figure out the left-hand turn, unfortunately. Cancer and Careers talks a lot about this, and they call it the swivel technique, which I love, but it's how do you swivel that conversation? Sometimes we are good at stopping it, and then everybody's just looking at each other. And I do think it's kind of in your court to swivel it. When the conversation is off of you, let's remember that that could have been stressful. That could have been a lot. And so how do you kind of find calm, right? So just feeling quiet and calm. Okay. Okay, let's see here. I'm loving that chat is flying. I'm loving it. That's great. Executive self. One more kind of metaphor for you too, is that can you consider that all of the emotions that you're having, all of the thoughts that you're having are kind of like the board meeting of you, right? It's all happening in your executive office up there. And your fear is saying, hey, have we considered this? Are we protecting ourselves around these, 4 possibilities, these fears that might be happening? Or this worry is really loud in a certain meeting. And it's saying, are we looking around corners? Are we creating contingency plans for these things happening? Professional self is we got to hold it all together at work. And all of these different parts of yourself are competing for your attention. And I think they're all there to protect you. But you're the chairman of the board. You're in charge. Get back in your executive self, your executive seat, and say, fear and worry, thank you for your input. Duly noted. I have made notes for the conversation with the doctor. There's nothing we can do about that today, but important points. And we will remember that for the next conversation with the doctor or when I think about this down the road. Professional self, I appreciate your input. Thank you. We will remember that and set our intentions as we walk into work tomorrow morning. Thank you for weighing in. Like, you get to be in charge of yourself. So remember, all those feelings and all those thoughts are there to serve you, but sometimes they can get really monopolizing of the board meeting, and you got to take control and bring it back in and balance that. Remember, what do you hope for yourself as you go through this? What are the values that have always been you that guide you? When you think of your career, what led you to this career in the first place? So if walking the work feels like overwhelm and dread, what led you to this work in the first place? Can you reconnect with that sense of meaning and purpose and kind of lean in on that, even in the midst of an overwhelming inbox or demands from other people or labor that feels really intense and hard? Why do you do this work? Or what brings you meaning and fulfillment and purpose? Those things are important. This is a slide that kind of talks again about boundaries, but a different boundary, the boundary between work and home. So remembering, can you create a transition ritual between I'm at work and it's over and I'm going to close my laptop if you work from home, or I'm going to use this time to commute to be silent and to really transition into my home self. These are the values that I hold at home that are really important to me. And that might mean slowing down. That might be connecting with my family. That might be, engaging in something that brings me joy. What are those things so that you can you need both sides of yourself and you can transition into that? Monitor the time you need to adjust, right? So you might need space when you first walk in the door in order to kind of fully transition into home before everything starts hitting you. And can you create that space? Complete the stress cycle. So when we feel stress physiologically, we go in that fight, flight, or freeze. And if there's not a bear or a lion or an attacker to fight off, then our body is still living here and we haven't really completed that stress cycle. So physical activity, walking, climbing the stairs, doing something with your body can help you release that stress and complete that stress cycle, which then in turn will probably leave you feeling hungry, tired. That's a full stress cycle. So, if people are finding it hard to sleep, it's because they're holding all of that and they need a way to kind of complete that stress cycle. Think about that for yourself at the end of the day. Burnout and dread can be related to stress, certainly related to work stress, but the quantity of your stress isn't the sole determinant of burnout. Like when we think about physicians who might be our nurses or, really intense jobs that are really, really stressed, they may not be feeling burnout because what they feel is very, very committed and purpose driven. So really, and if you can find some degree of pleasure in what you do, or you can think about the balance between what you do that's stressful and demanding and where you find relaxation and joy, that helps to mitigate burnout. So think about the two sides of that scale. What are your passions? What is the you outside of cancer? Cancer can sometimes take all of our attention. This is my last slide. I know we're running close on time. And then I also kind of flew through some of those last ones. But when we think of, strategies that work at work, doing someone a favor, in my opinion, that's sometimes getting out of the spotlight of our own stress. Our stress can feel consuming. Our worry can feel just dominate all of our thinking. And sometimes we've got to parachute out of that, right? And one of the best ways to parachute out of our stress, parachute out of our worry and fear is to turn the spotlight on someone else, right? So I'm going to give you my attention, and that's going to take it off of me just kind of constantly spinning over here about myself. Get organized. There is evidence that when we have clarity in our workspace and our home, that our minds feel quieter and calmer too. Simplifying and getting things cleaned up and organized and laid out. A lot of what lives in our head, if we put it down on paper, it looks a little bit more manageable than when it all lives in our mind. So getting organized is a proven strategy that can begin to help you to feel better. Hide the distractions so that you can focus and it doesn't steal your attention again and again and again. Disappear for a bit, take a break. Recognize I'm in a moment of struggle. I need to get grounded. And I know what that's going to need. It's going to mean a walk around the room. It's going to need getting up and going to get a drink. It's going to mean taking a walk outside. Stay hydrated. These are basic 101. You are a totally different self when you are hungry, tired, and thirsty, right? So getting to bed on time, making sure that you're eating through the day, drinking water, that's going to leave your mental clarity and your emotional stability in a different place. Avoid conflict, find the pot stirrers and steer clear. And I love this one, end your day like you mean it. Like come home from a big day at work, give yourself credit for what you've done, and then end your day like you mean it. Give yourself that moment to calm. We are right at our time, Scott. I didn't leave a lot of time for those Q&As, but hopefully I see that chat's flying.
I think you've done a great job going through the chat. I do have a few questions and a few quick things here, but thank you so much. I feel like I take notes every time I see you talk, which is surprising to me. I'm like, I've seen this before. I've seen her talk, and every time I'm like, oh yeah, that's something new. Ooh, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm gonna try that next time.
Yeah. Somebody just said, is there a list of feelings? I just saw that fly. The chat's flying, but I just saw that you can Google feeling wheel and it has like all kinds of feelings. And it's a great way to increase your feeling word vocabulary. I just saw that fly.
Amazing. Just quickly before we get into a few more questions, these are all of our upcoming events. We have webinars throughout the whole year. These are the next 4. We have one in 2 weeks on balancing remote work and cancer. And then we're jumping into a 3-month series on job search. So we have career shifting, tips, tools, and techniques. We have first impressions, which is going to be about resumes and LinkedIn, as well as a webinar on networking. All 3 of those are going to be led by Julie Jansen, who some of you might know. She's a wonderful career coach, again, has been working with us since the inception of Cancer and Careers. So we hope you'll join us for those. We also have our Midwest Conference coming up on Friday, March 22nd, and our national conference on Friday, June 21st. Those are just the time frames that they're being held in. They're both going to be held on Zoom, so anybody around the country, around the world even, can join for those. You can register for free on our website for all of these, or click the events link at the bottom of the slide for everything coming up. And then just a shout out to follow us on social media to stay up to date. I also have my email here. If you have any questions later on, feel free to shoot me an email and we'll get an answer for you. And I'm going to leave this slide up, which is, again, all the CE information if anybody's requesting certificates for today. So Julie, just quickly, I have a few questions. The first one here is, I recently learned TFAR, thoughts lead to feelings that lend to action leading to results. What are your thoughts on this model acronym? I'm not sure if you're familiar or not with this.
I don't know that specific acronym, but it sounds a heck of a lot like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which I know quite a lot about. And basically what it's saying is that the way that we think drives how we feel, and what we feel often influences what we choose to do. I'm going to pick up my phone, I'm going to yell at this person about this, or I'm going to just stay in my bed all day, what we do. So but then the effort then is to pay attention to that line and say, are the things that I'm thinking accurate, or are they distorted in any way? Because if they are, or if there's other ways of thinking about this exact same thing, then that might result in me feeling different. And if I feel different, then I might care for myself or behave differently. So I think that what you're talking about is you're talking about that line, that connection between thinking, feeling, and doing. And yes, there's a lot of different ways you can begin to peel that onion and pay attention.
Here is another one. How can you deal with a toxic work environment? I could handle it better before my diagnosis, but my threshold is much lower now. My job is very high stress and very fast paced with high production goals and expectations daily.
So you could handle it before your diagnosis. That means that you have those skills. They live within you, right? You've done this before, but there's something about you that's different now. So that's that reality check, that compassionate authority. I have to approach my day in a different way, right? Where do you have control? First of all, that might feel really frustrating to you. It might feel irritating that others are not getting it, or that you're in this circumstance, right? And you're okay to notice that and to honor those feelings that you're having. But then I think the question is, where do I have control? What can I do that might help me to navigate this differently? Can I have a conversation with people and express, maybe some differences and expectations for just right now, not forever and ever, amen, but for right now? Can I change when I work because I'm more alert at these times in the day? Can I restructure the way I'm working? I've never had to do it this way, but right now I need to chunk it up, and I need to do work in these other ways. What are the processes that are working for me today? So begin to think about where you have control, and not the outcome, but rather the process to get there.
That's great. We have time for one more question. There are a few more here. If we haven't gotten to your question, please feel free to shoot us an email. cancerandcareers@cew.org is the fastest way to get somebody. You can also send me an email on the slide before here. But the final question I have for you here is, what are your suggestions for those of us who are alone, i.e. not partnered while going through cancer? It's hard for me to ask for help and emotional support, which I'm finding I need when you don't have anyone else around on a daily basis, especially for those of us working from home. What are your suggestions?
Okay, so alone, first of all, I would hope for you to feel maybe less alone. So you can't get a roommate, or you're going to have moments where realistically just you are alone, right? You're alone maybe from the point you come home until the next morning when you leave. Those are alone times. And in those times where you can't change it, you live alone. How do you structure that time? I think of routines and structure as something to hang your day on, right? When I get home, I do these same things, and those routines help me feel grounded. They help me feel purpose-driven, right? They help me feel okay. But then also it might be at this time in your life, it might be plugging in. I need a support group. And if I can't find one face to face, I'm going to find it online. I need other people that I connect. And listen, there's always a place for a quiet member of a support group. Just because you're in a support group doesn't mean you have to be contributing and talking all the time. You can walk into a support group and be a quiet listener, a non-judgmental listener, and really get a lot out of that until you feel comfortable sharing. So I would say, hey, open up that idea that there are a lot of national organizations where you can tap into maybe a group. Maybe you do find a cancer-related fitness group, right? There are people who are just together for the purpose of, walking. But in that, they're also talking a little bit about their diagnosis and they're using their bodies in different ways. So finding that cancer support community might be really helpful at this time.
And if anybody needs help connecting or finding something, we have resources here. If you shoot us an email, we can
And
find
I
a
saw
local to you. There's online ones, there.
tons of resources. I just saw in the chat Smith Center, and Smith Center also has a lot, I don't want to overspeak them, but they have a lot of things that are creative too. So support group isn't just about, let's sit around and talk about cancer. Support group could also be about writing. It could be about something artistic. It could be about doing something. And sometimes that feels a little bit easier to connect.
Yeah. Well, Julie, thank you so much for this. Thank you all for attending and for your great comments and questions throughout the whole thing. Again, if we didn't get to your question, I'm so sorry, but shoot us an email, cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we'll get you a one-on-one response. So thank you again, Julie.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having me.
Have a great day.
Take care.